Welcome to part 6 of the King's Gambit under 1000 ELO course. This will be our last video on the accepted Gambit, at least for now. We may go over a few oddballs later in the course. Let's get to the position we've been looking at. So far, we have considered 5 different moves in this position. These are all of the most common moves. The last common move, which I define as being played in more than 1 in 20 games, is bishop to c5. This is already a blunder. This video will be short because this move is so easy to play against, and already we are seeing a 60% win rate. The reason why this move is so bad is because not only does it allow us to continue with our normal plan of pushing d4, but it entices us to play this move because it now comes with the added benefit of attacking the misplaced bishop. So without thinking, we can play d4. We attack black's bishop, and he has to respond in some way. Since black has to respond, he won't have time to save his now exposed f-pawn, which we will gladly claim at our earliest convenience. Let's start with the most common move, played 2 out of 3 times here, bishop b6. We simply take the pawn. Black will then play some sort of developing move. One common mistake to be aware of is knight to f6. This simply allows us to push our e-pawn, like we did in a similar knight f6 line. The knight gets chased around, and we get way ahead in development. The better move played commonly is d6, in which case we just continue to develop. I like to do that first with the knight, because it's generally wise to develop knights before bishops, but also it defends the undefended e4 pawn, which will need to be done at some point. Most commonly, black will play the knight pinning move with his bishop, which, as we have seen in the King's Gambit, is almost always a weak move. He gives us a chance to chase the bishop away, and we hope he will capture our knight, so we can simply get our queen out and castle and be ahead in development. If he chooses not to give us that luxury, then we just patiently finish our development, and the game is in our favor. Like I said, in this line you can play simple and come out on top because black got off to such a rough start. Black has a couple more options. He can give us the check, which really only delays his bishop problem because we can immediately attack the bishop again. The bishop has now helped us get 2 pawns out without wasting any time for us. He still has the same problem with his bishop and needs to retreat. It is best to retreat back towards his home, but to do so is humiliating. So black usually chooses to maintain some sort of pressure on the king by retreating to a5, but this just gives us yet another way to chase to bishop and get our pawns out. So black retreats to his only square. Now we're still eyeing the f-pawn, but notice that the bishop has no squares to go to. So why not try one last pawn push to set a trap for the bishop? a4 doesn't work as well, just because black can respond with a5. We can avoid this problem by pushing the pawn on the other side of the bishop, preparing to push c5 if we can, and trap the bishop. Black can't play c5 because we have too much control over that square. He can play a5, which is what the computer recommends, but his bishop ends up getting pretty stuck because we can still push c5, and the bishop has to retreat to his prison to avoid being captured, after which we can finally take the pawn we have been looking at this whole time. And just look at this dominant position. We have so much queenside space. Our pieces will be able to get out to the squares we want, and black is having a hard time breathing in his limited quarters. It's safe to say that bishop b4 is a weak move, but it's played a quarter of the time here. The third most common move is bishop to d6, the idea being to hold on to the pawn, and there are several good moves for us here. The obvious one that has probably jumped out to you, and the one I recommend for simplicity, is the pawn push e5, simply blocking the bishop from defending f4 so that we can capture it as planned. Black often gives the b4 check here, but you already know how to deal with that. So let's look at bishop to e7. We simply take the pawn as planned. Black usually finds the best move d6 to challenge our central pawn structure. And remember, as King's Gambit players, we just want to develop fast, so we check if this move has a pressing threat, which it really doesn't. We have plenty of defense on e5, so we can ignore this move and just continue to a speedy development. Really, it doesn't matter too much what you play, as long as you are getting a piece out to a reasonable square. I like the move bishop to c4 here. It could entice black into playing d5. in order to attack our bishop, which is fine with us, because it locks in our center pawns. More often, black will try to take down our pawn structure, which is a mistake because it allows us to advance our pieces even further into the attack. We take with the knight so that we can put pressure on f7. Before moving the knight, we instinctively make a quick glance to the h4 square to see that we have a response if black tries to give us a check, and we do. So black now needs to deal with the f7 threat we have created. He can't defend the pawn with the knight because we have the h6 square covered, so he is forced to defend with the bishop. Taking his bishop is fine because he has to recapture with the pawn, opening up the diagonal for our queen to attack. This attack is a bit of a dead end, though it puts black on his heels for the middle game. A slightly more devastating move is d5, forcing the bishop to move, which gives us a second chance to target the f7 square while adding an additional threat at the same time. d6 attacks the bishop and opens up the bishop on the diagonal again to attack f7. Two threats at once is extremely hard to deal with, so black deals with the most pressing one. And now you can capitalize on the weak f7 square and have a winning advantage. That's going to be all for this video. Most of the lines are simple to play. It's important to be aware of this move since it is played often, but really most of what you need to know is to play d4, to counterattack the bishop, and then take the f-pawn when you get a chance. From there, play is generally simple. You can develop and enter an advantageous middle game. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.